Okay, so when we decided I was going to do first fruits, I thought, yes, this is excellent because I've done first fruits before. And I went back and looked at my notes and I thought, oh dear, how one's opinion changes with time. So I couldn't use what I had before, so I had to start again. So, yeah. So let's start by reading the two main scriptures. So Leviticus 23, 9 to 22. Give me a thumbs up when you're all there and I'll read it out. You all saw
So Leviticus 23, did you say?
Leviticus 23, 9 to 23.
Got you. Okay.
You there, Martina? Yeah, okay. I'm reading from the CJB just because that was the one I picked up when I was preparing it. Adonai said to Moshe, tell the people of Israel, after you enter the land I am giving you and harvest its ripe crops, you are to bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the Kohen. He is to wave the sheaf before Adonai so that you will be accepted. The Kohen is to wave it on the day after the Shabbat. On the day that you wave the sheaf, you are to offer a male lamb without defect in its first year as a burnt offering for Adonai. Its grain offering is to be 1 gallon of fine flour mixed with olive oil, an offering made by fire to Adonai as a fragrant aroma. Its drink offering is to be of wine, 1 quart. You are not to eat bread, dried grain, or fresh grain until the day you bring the offering for your God. This is a permanent regulation through all your generations, no matter where you live. From the day after the day of rest, that is from the day you bring the sheaf for waving, you are to count 7 full weeks until the day after the 7th week. You are to count 50 days, and then you are to present a new grain offering to Adonai. You must bring bread from your homes for waving, 2 loaves made with 1 gallon of fine flour baked with leaven as first fruits for Adonai. Along with the bread, present 7 lambs without defect, 1 year old, 1 young bull and 2 rams. These will be a burnt offering for Adonai with their grain and drink offerings, an offering made by fire as a fragrant aroma for Adonai. Offer 1 male goat as a sin offering and 2 male lambs, 1 year old, as a sacrifice of peace offerings. The Kohen will wave them with the bread of the first fruits as a wave offering before Adonai with the 2 lambs. These will be holy for Adonai, for the Kohen. On the same day, you are to call a holy convocation. Do not do any kind of ordinary work. This is a permanent regulation through all your generations, no matter where you live. When you harvest the ripe crops produced in your land, don't harvest all the way to the corners of the field, and don't gather the ears of grain left by the harvesters. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am Adonai your God. Adonai said to Moshe, tell the people of Israel, in the 7th year, the first of the month is to be for you a day of complete rest for remembering, a holy convocation announced with blasts and the shofar. Do not do any kind of ordinary work and bring an offering made by fire to Adonai. Probably read far too far there, but never mind. And the other one is Deuteronomy 26, 1 to 10. You all there? Yeah, okay. When you have come to the land Adonai your God is giving you as your inheritance, taken possession of it and settled there, you are to take the first fruits of all the crops the ground yields, which you will harvest from your land that Adonai your God is giving you. Put them in a basket and go to the place where Adonai your God will choose to have his name live. You will approach the Kohen holding office at the time. and say to him, "Today I declare to Adonai your God that I have come to the land Adonai swore to our ancestors that he would give us. The Kohen will take the basket from your hand and put it down in front of the altar of Adonai your God. Then in the presence of Adonai your God, you are to say, my ancestor was a nomad from Aram. He went down into Egypt, few in number, and stayed. There he became a great, strong, populous nation. But the Egyptians treated us badly. They oppressed us and impressed harsh slavery on us. So we cried out to Adonai, the God of our ancestors. Adonai heard us and saw our misery, toil, and oppression. And Adonai brought us out of Egypt with a strong hand and a stretched out arm, with great terror and with signs and wonders. Now he has brought us to this place and given us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Therefore, as you see, I have now brought the first fruits of the land which you, Adonai, have given me. You are then to put the basket down before Adonai your God, prostrate yourself before Adonai your God, and take joy in all the good that Adonai your God has given you, your household, the Levi, and the foreigner living with you. Okay, so I know you said to do first fruits, counting of the Omer, and Shavuot, but I haven't done Shavuot because I felt that that was too far away and that somebody else could do that nearer the time. So I've really concentrated just on first fruits and then counting of the Omer. So first fruits, it marks the earliest harvest of the year. So this is the barley harvest. And on this day, the first few ears of barley were presented as an offering and waved before Yahweh in the temple. The implication of this was that if Yahweh had blessed them with an early harvest for the barley, that he would obviously bless them with a later harvest in the late summer. And do you hear what's going on behind me? Can you hear the noise? I'm afraid John's having a terrible paddy in the bath upstairs, but we'll just ignore that. It's just started because I've started this teaching, of course. Like the weekly Shabbat, this feast also occurs on the same day of the week and is the day after Sabbath, so it's a Sunday. And this year, unless, Mike, you correct me, it's the 4th of April, yeah? Yeah, excellent. Okay, so the first time we actually see the first fruit offering is when Cain and Abel appear before the Lord. Abel's offering is accepted and Cain's is rejected. Abel gave the first and the best, while Cain's offering was neither the first nor the best. So don't bother turning with me. I've put pieces of paper in my Bible and I can just read it out. So this is Genesis 4, 2-7. I'll start from 1. The man had sexual relations with Hava, his wife. She conceived, gave birth to Cain, and Cain means acquisition, and said, I have acquired a man for Adonai. In addition, she gave birth to his brother Abel. Hevel kept sheep while Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought an offering to Adonai from the produce of the soil, and Hevel too brought from the firstborn of his sheep, including their fat. Adonai accepted Hevel and his offering, but did not accept Cain and his offering. Cain was very angry and his face fell. Adonai said to Cain, why are you angry? Why so downcast? If you are doing what is good, shouldn't you hold your head high? And if you don't do what is good, sin is crouching at the door. It wants you, but you can rule over it. And I suppose, in effect, that just sums up what you were saying earlier, Mike, about your friend, that, you know, if we do what is right, we'll get the blessings, but if we don't, well, then things just don't quite go according to our plans anyway. So yes, so I'm going to go back to Leviticus again, Leviticus 23, and this time I'm going to read 15 and 16. Well, we've already read them, but I'll just read them again. Yeah. From the day after the day of rest, that is from the day you bring the sheaf of for waving, you are to count 7 full weeks until the day after the 7th week. You are to count 50 days, and then you are to present a new grain offering to Adonai. Yeah. So first fruits mark the start of Israel's grain harvest. Now that's rubbish. I've written that down. That's rubbish. I've just told you it was the barley harvest. Yeah. So yeah, it marked the start of the grain harvest, yes, but it was the barley. And the beginning of the count for the weeks, which is also known as Pentecost or Shavuot. What we call the counting of the Omer. So we all know Shavuot takes place on the 50th day after first fruits. So it's a barley harvest for first fruits, and then we count the Omer. And while we're counting the Omer, the wheat is ripening. And by the end of counting the Omer, the wheat is ready for harvest. So Shavuot also celebrates the ripening of the wheat crop. Now, if we go to, I can go on my own. Deuteronomy 26, 1 to 10, if I've got, was that what I've read already? Yes, it is. No, it isn't. What I've read to you already. Yes, I have. So yeah, we've read Deuteronomy 26, 1 to 10. This was the instruction of how to observe first fruits in the time of the temple. So first fruits is a demonstration to man that God is owner of all our wealth. He is the one who gives us the ability to be successful as we return to him, the first of our produce. We are in effect acknowledging him as the source. So I was thinking when you said there, Martinez, you've got so much work on. I'm exactly the same. I can't keep on top of all the work. And I just thought, you know, aren't we being blessed? Aren't we being blessed because we have got so much work just to keep us going, you know, and when other people are struggling in this time, it's just amazing. Yeah, right, wait a minute till I make sure I've read what I was going to read. I think so, yes. Now, I'm going to go to Numbers 18 now, 14 to 19. 14 to 19. So everything in Israel which has been consecrated unconditionally is to be yours. Everything that comes first out of the womb of all living things which they offer to Adonai, whether human or animal, will be yours. However, the firstborn of a human being you must redeem, and the firstborn of an unclean beast you are to redeem. The sum to be paid for redeeming anyone a month old or over is to be 5 shekels of silver, 2 ounces, as you value it, using the sanctuary shekel, but this is the same as 20 gerahs. But the firstborn of an ox, sheep, or goat you are not to redeem. They are holy. You are to splash their blood against the altar and make their fat go up in smoke as an offering made by fire, as a fragrant aroma for Adonai. Their meat will be yours, like the breast that is waved and the right thigh. They will be yours. All the contributions of holy things which the people of Israel offer to Adonai, I have given to you, your sons and your daughters with you. This is a perpetual law, an eternal covenant of salt before Adonai for you and your descendants with you. Right. So Yeshua was presented to the temple to fulfill these verses. And if I turn to Luke 2, 21 to 23. Where are we? That's not Luke. I've gone too far. On the 8th day, when it was time for his Brit Milah, he was given the name Yeshua, which is what the angel had called him before his conception. When the time came for their purification according to the Torah of Moshe, they took him up to Jerusalem to present him to Adonai, as is written in the Torah of Adonai. Every firstborn male is to be consecrated to Adonai. So, page. And then I'm going to go to John 12:23 to 24. That's not John 12. Maybe I've missed putting in what I was, oh, here we are. John 12:23 to 24. Yeshua gave them this answer: the time has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Yes, indeed. I tell you that unless a grain of wheat that falls to the ground dies, it stays just a grain. But if it dies, it produces a big harvest. Just as Passover speaks to us of Yeshua's suffering and death, first fruits was fulfilled when, having risen from the grave, he then ascended into the presence of the Father. Now, if we go to 1 Corinthians 15, 20 to 23. But the fact is that the Messiah has been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have died. For since death came through a man, also the resurrection of the dead has come through a man. For just as in connection with Adam all die, so in connection with the Messiah all will be made alive, but each in his own order. The Messiah is the first fruits, and then those who belong to the Messiah at the time of his coming. Paul shows here that Messiah fulfilled the day of first fruits by being the first to rise from the dead to an indestructible existence. So if he is the first, then he is not the only one, and this, of course, is our hope. Right, I'm going to go to James 1:18 now. And verse 18. Having made his decision, he gave birth to us through a word that can be relied upon, in order that we should be a kind of first fruits of all that he created. So we are identified with Christ as first fruits. Now, page. So I wrote down the parallels with Christ. As Caiaphas was trying Yeshua, the servants of the disciples of the Sanhedrin were in the barley field, judging the crop, to decide which would be harvested for first fruits. On the day the Romans were binding up Yeshua for crucifixion, the disciples of the Sanhedrin were binding up the barley sheath for first fruits. And then I'm going to go to John 20. John 20, 11 to 12. No, hold on. I seem to have I have two things on this page. 12, okay. But Miriam stood outside crying. As she cried, she bent down, peered into the tomb, and saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Yeshua had been, one at the head and one at the feet. Mary sees a live display of the mercy seat. And then if I go on to 17, stop holding on to me, Yeshua said to her, because I haven't yet gone back to the Father, but go to my brothers and tell them that I'm going back to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Mary could not touch Yeshua. The Jews could not touch the barley before the Feast of First Fruits. Afterwards, they could harvest it. After going to the Father, Thomas could touch him, as we see later on. So the crops were not kosher. They weren't acceptable until the barley sheath had been offered in the temple. Now I'm going to go to 1 John 2 and verse 2. Also, he is the kapara, the atonement, or as it says in the New King James, propitiation. Also, he is the kapara for our sins, and not only for ours, but also for those of the whole world. We are kosher or acceptable because of what Yeshua has done on our behalf in fulfilling the Feast of First Fruits to the letter. Okay. Yeshua is like a trailblazer, making the way of salvation clear. We're called to live in the same resurrection power that raised Yeshua from the dead. So how should we celebrate this day? So one, it's a time to count our blessings. We can rejoice not only in Yeshua's resurrection and all that this means, but also in the first fruits of our own harvest. This is the time to wave our Yahweh-given harvest before him. For example, if we have been instrumental in winning people for Yeshua, been blessed financially, received healing, had victory over evil in an area of our lives, been blessed with new spiritual gifts, either ourselves or in our fellowship, or in my case, hearing about a new baby. Whatever it is that Yahweh has done, this is the day that we wave it before him in thanksgiving and praise. By doing this, there is the promise of greater things. Israel offered the first fruits in the sure knowledge that this was the foretaste of the greater harvest yet to come. In the same way, if we give thanks for what Father has done for us this day, we can be sure of greater blessings. And I thought about the parable of the talents here, and I haven't looked it up to know where it is, but you know what I mean. If we give thanks, like the chap who had 10 talents, they'll multiply. And I can't remember what I was listening to on YouTube recently, but it really landed with me. I actually think it might have been Robert Henderson, and I know there's dodgy areas there. Okay, but what he said was, when we start a new venture, be it an occupation or whatever, if we give all the first proceeds of what we earn from that venture to Yahweh, it then permits him, it allows him to bless that venture thereafter. For example, if I do move to Lewis, which I hope to do, one of my thoughts is to have because we're on the Hebridean Way, which is a long distance cycle route, I thought if I put a summer house down at the bottom of my garden and stuck in a pot of soup each day and some scones, which is just what I do, and an honesty box, then people could stop there and get the scones and the soup and have a snack when they need it, especially on a wet, windy day in the Isle of Lewis. Then, if I was to take, say, the first month's proceeds of that and just totally give them to Yahweh, then, according to my understanding, that should allow him to bless that venture thereafter. So that's what I'm meaning by that. So that's the first one of how we should celebrate the day. The second, the greatest of all the promises of Yahweh for the believer must be the promise of the resurrection. When we first come to Yeshua and are born again, we receive what Paul called the first fruits of the Spirit. The gift of the Holy Spirit is like a deposit guaranteeing us a part in the first resurrection, when our bodies will be redeemed and we will be raised to be with Yeshua forever. And what a hope that is. Okay, now, so that is first fruits. So I'm going to go on to counting of the Omer, or pardon the pronunciation, Sepheret HaOmer in Hebrew. So in Leviticus 23:15-16, which we read already, I might just read it again actually. Let me go back there. If I can find my way back to Leviticus. You see, I've moved all my bits of paper now. Leviticus 23. Hold on, just about there. 15-16. From the day after the day of rest, that is from the day you bring the sheaf for waving, you are to count 7 full weeks. Until the day after the 7th week, you are to count 50 days, and then you are to present a new grain offering to Adonai. Okay. So In this scripture, we are given the instruction to count the Omer. In verse 21, which I will also read again, on the same day, you're to call a holy convocation. Do not do any kind of ordinary work. This is a permanent regulation through all your generations, no matter where you live. So in verse 21, we are told this is a permanent regulation. It's not an optional one for us. The first disciples did this, and they received the promised Ruach HaKodesh on the 50th day, Shavuot, also known as the Feast of Weeks, because of the counting of 7 weekly Shabbats. So on day one of the count, Yeshua appeared to Mary Magdalene in the garden, and he also opened up the Torah to the two on the road to Emmaus. On day 2, he appeared to the disciples in the upper room. It all culminated on the 40th day when the disciples watched as Yeshua ascended to the right hand of the Father, at which point he also instructed them to wait for the promised Ruach. So I'll just go to Acts. So Acts 1, 3 to 4. After his death, he showed himself to them and gave many convincing proofs that he was alive. During a period of 40 days they saw him, and he spoke with them about the kingdom of God. So during that first one that we read about in the New Testament, during the first counting of the Omer, he appeared to them many times. Shavuot is the only feast we are asked to count up to. It is a big day and one of the 3 big feasts where the people are instructed to go to Jerusalem to celebrate it. Note we are told to count up to it and not down to it. So it's almost like a build-up of excitement as the day approaches, and no other feast gets this kind of build-up. So I was talking to the Tam and Kate and Anna at our ladies group this week, and just saying about this, and we had a discussion about it. We in our culture don't get this at all, you know. I mean, we in this group are all just learning about keeping these feasts, but in Israel, they'll know exactly what's going on and they'll get the build-up. I counted the Omer last year, but I just marked it off in a calendar. It was a bit dull, really. We don't get this anticipation, and I pray that we get it. I pray we get something of it that this year, each of us listening here, that we get something of this build-up and this excitement to this great day of Shavuot. So Yeshua is, no, I have to put a score through that bit, so I obviously wasn't going to read it. So it is a privilege for us to count to the Feast of Shavuot with the growing anticipation and expectation of what the day of Pentecost actually represents. In Exodus, it was Yahweh's voice giving the Torah from the fire on the mountains. That was the climax. And in Messiah's time, it is the giving of his blessing and the gifts by his Ruach HaKodesh. So sounding like a mighty wind and seen as tongues of fire. So I was making the comparison there. On the mountain, the Torah came from the fire on the mountain. And in Messiah's time, it was the mighty wind and the tongues of fire that landed on the disciples. The Omer count is a pointer to the Jubilee year of relief. A summary of the spring feast, and it's the historical significance of the spring feast. So the Passover in the Old Testament was the slaying of the Passover lamb. In the New Testament, the significance, it was the crucifixion of Yeshua. The Feast of Unleavened Bread in the Old Testament was the Exodus from Egypt, and in the New Testament it was the grave of Yeshua. First fruits in the Old Testament was the start of the grain harvest, and in the New Testament it was the resurrection of Yeshua. The Feast of Weeks or or Pentecost or Shavuot is the remembrance, in the Old Testament, was the remembrance of the giving of the law at Mount Sinai. In the New Testament, it was the giving of the Ruach HaKodesh. And finally, the counting of the Omer in the Old Testament was the remembrance of the intervening days between the Exodus from Egypt and the giving of the law on Mount Sinai. In the New Testament, the counting of the Omer is the build-up to this great feast of Shavuot. So that was it.
That is spot on. You know, as I said, actually, when you were going to be doing this, it was about doing the first fruits and counting the Omer leading toward Pentecost. So Shavuot. So you did exactly that.
Okay.
And you hit on all the brilliant scriptures that tie us together, Old Testament and New Testament. So really, we couldn't have asked for more. Thank you so much. It was really awesome. Appreciate it.